The Tharok's dominion had encountered hundreds of developing civilizations. Over the past 3 centuries, most fell in line quickly, some resisted. But resistance was usually brief, limited to angry speeches, ineffective weapons, and desperate pleas. In the Dominion's long history of conquest, never had a pre-FTL species posed a serious challenge. So, when a probe detected Earth, a planet rich in oxygen, water, metals, and genetic diversity, the decision was unanimous. It would be claimed that their analysis of Earth's broadcast radio waves, video signals, global data traffic only confirmed their assumptions. Humans were unpredictable, fragmented into hundreds of nations, and constantly at odds with one another. War, crime, and political chaos dominated their entertainment and media. The Dominion's analysts concluded that this was a frightened species, on the brink of self-destruction. In the Grand Council Hall aboard the flagship Ecliptara, Fleet Commander Sarnal Vex looked over the gathered captains with practiced confidence. They used combustion-based vehicles, fossil energy, and crude satellites, he said, his voice echoing through the calm sphere. They still argue over imaginary borders and outdated beliefs. This will be a brief operation. The invasion fleet consisted of 12 orbit-class cruisers, 3 dreadnoughts, and 100 precision dropships. It was more than enough at least for any other world they had conquered before. Their objective was simple: establish planetary control points, dismantle major military defenses, and begin the integration process. A few displays of force, a few firm commands, and the humans would fall in line. That was the plan. And so, on a crisp morning in late October, the skies over Earth changed. The people of Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Cairo, and New York City looked up in confusion as massive silhouettes drifted silently above. Some thought it was a new stunt or military drill. Some filmed the moment. Others stood frozen in awe. Then came the message. A calm, synthesized voice spoke in over 100 human languages. This world is now under the protection and authority of the Tharok's dominion. You will not be harmed if you comply. All local governments are to surrender operational control. Resistance will be met with force. The message looped across radio channels, mobile devices, and public screens. But instead of surrender, humanity responded with something else. Confusion turned into tension, tension became fear, and fear ignited into unity. Within minutes, air defense systems locked onto the alien ships. Fighter jets scrambled from bases across continents. Civilians poured into streets not to run, but to help. First responders set up communication hubs. Engineers brought power grids online in remote bunkers. In some places, neighbors who had never spoken before passed out supplies and shared protective gear. The Tharoks were not prepared for this. Their first wave of dropships encountered organized resistance before even reaching the ground. In a remote part of Eastern Europe, a single alien squad was surrounded and overwhelmed by a mix of local military, hunters, and mechanics armed with makeshift launchers and drone swarms. In Texas, a downed alien pod was captured and its tech quickly shipped to a nearby university. By morning, Earth's top minds were already trying to decode it. In South Korea, Japan, and Germany, cyber teams broke into the Tharok's communications grid and began feeding them false coordinates. The Dominion had expected silence, fear, and surrender. Instead, it found a species that had spent centuries learning how to fight, adapt, and survive. Commander Vex, reviewing damage reports from multiple continents, leaned back in his command seat in disbelief. They're not unified, he muttered, scanning the live feed of burning drop ships and retreating squads. But they're not divided either. For the first time in his career, he felt something unfamiliar. And somewhere far below, on the surface of the strange blue world, humanity began to show what it truly was. Not just survivors, but something far more dangerous. As night fell across the planet, Earth was already burning, but not from surrender. Fires lit the skies from wrecked dropships, not cities. Smoke curled from battlefields where humanity stood its ground. The Tharoks had planned for a quick, clean occupation. Instead, they found themselves in a global hornet's nest. In Washington, D.C., military leadership convened in emergency bunkers. They weren't arguing over political control or national pride. They were sharing tactics, transmitting satellite data, and deploying joint defense units with countries they'd barely spoken to. A week earlier, in Beijing, Moscow, Berlin, and Delhi, similar scenes unfolded. The world hadn't suddenly become united, but it had become focused. The message was clear in every language and on every frequency, defend Earth first, argue later. Major General Elaine Cartwright of the U.S. Air Force had never imagined she'd be sharing encrypted channels with her Russian counterpart, coordinating an airstrike over the Pacific against an alien vessel. But here they were, they're using predictable drop patterns, she observed, watching a live feed of troop movement in South America. Every time they land near a population center, they expect surrender. Instead, they get a counterattack. They're underestimating our will to fight. Meanwhile, in Sao Paulo, a crowd of civilians, construction workers, students, retirees had successfully ambushed a scouting team using improvised explosives and clever decoys. They didn't have military gear. They had courage, numbers, and the sheer unpredictability that came with being human. The Thaurochs were struggling to adapt. Commander Sarnovex reviewed tactical reports aboard the Ecliptara, trying to understand where the plan had unraveled. Every city they landed in was supposed to serve as a control node. Instead, half of them were now offline, the others under siege. Their ground units weren't just losing, they were being outsmarted. They don't follow standard combat logic, his strategy officer muttered. Some of their fighters charge without cover, others retreat, only to ambush us moments later. We captured a unit that used fireworks to simulate weapon fire. Another group faked a surrender, then disabled a drop ship from the inside. Vex stared at the display of Earth, now covered in red indicator symbols of failed deployments, destroyed vessels and unresponsive squads. They're chaotic, he said quietly. But there's purpose beneath the chaos, far below. In the ruins of a downed cruiser in eastern Africa, human salvage teams were already at work. Mechanics, hackers, and amateur radio operators examined scorched consoles and alien panels. Comparing notes in multiple languages, they shared findings online, creating a rapidly expanding knowledge base on how the alien tech functioned. Within 48 hours, human engineers had reverse-engineered basic interface protocols. Weapons systems were still mysterious, but the Dominion's communications encryption had already been cracked by a teenager in Estonia, working off a public Wi-Fi signal across the world. The line between civilian and soldier blurred. Medical students became battlefield medics. Retired engineers turned alien wreckage into defensive barricades. Gamers, drone pilots, and garage tinkerers stepped up with insights the military had missed. And all the while, humanity was learning, not just how to resist, but how to fight back smarter. At the United Nations Emergency Assembly, a representative from Kenya spoke with urgency and conviction. We have been tested many times, she said, her voice echoing across the chamber, by famine, war, plague, and one another. But this test is different. This time, we do not face each other. We face something greater, and so we rise together. They came thinking we were weak. Let them see how strong we are when we refuse to fall. The world listened. So did the Thaurochs. Commander Vex, now pacing aboard the bridge, watched a new feed from Cairo. An entire battalion had been pushed back by coordinated attacks from local militias and armored divisions that had joined forces. On the fly, this was not what he expected. This was not a defeat. It was a message. Earth would not be taken. The third day of the invasion began with silence, no orders from high command, no victory reports, and no new deployments. For the first time in the Thaurochs Dominion's long history of expansion, their fleet had gone quiet over a target world. It was not due to technical failure, it was confusion across Earth. The Thaurochs occupation forces were shrinking. Drop ships that had landed confidently now sat in smoldering ruins. Patrol units that had spread to secure cities had vanished or been overwhelmed. Their orbital reinforcements hesitated, unsure of where or even if they could safely deploy. Humanity wasn't just resisting, they were evolving with every engagement. In Poland, a small defense group used infrared tracking and drones to bait an alien patrol into a dead-end tunnel system. The invaders never emerged. In Argentina, a farming community tricked a Thaurochs hover unit into sinking into a concealed irrigation reservoir, then stripped it for parts before the wreck had cooled. In cities, rooftops became sniper nests, alleys turned into ambush corridors, and abandoned vehicles hid traps crafted from salvaged alien metal and electronics. The Thaurochs command structure, designed for orderly campaigns, found itself unable to process the rapid and scattered nature of human tactics. There was no central resistance. There were millions of small ones, all adapting, all learning, all angry. In a mobile command center in northern Canada, Colonel Akio Watanabe reviewed footage from global resistance cells. His expression was grim but steady. "We're not fighting for borders anymore," he said to the international officers around him. "We're fighting for survival, and when humans fight for survival, they become something unstoppable." He tapped on a holographic projection of a dismantled alien weapon. "This came from a battle in Nigeria. Not only did they neutralize the attackers, they sent us the parts before we even asked. People are thinking ahead, working together." French engineer leaned forward. "We're decoding their power systems. They use a form of compact plasma we've only theorized about. If we stabilize the field, we can weaponize it ourselves." The room fell silent for a moment. It wasn't just resistance anymore. Earth was turning the tide dot up in orbit. On the Ecliptara, Commander Sarnal Vex stood alone in the observation chamber. Below, the planet turned slowly blue, green, and cloud-streaked. It looked so peaceful from above. He knew better now. Their culture had been dismissed as erratic, their history violent, their species unrefined. But it wasn't randomness. It was resilience. The humans didn't wait for orders. They didn't need permission. They didn't follow a single leader or strategy. Instead, they followed instinct and determination, and it was breaking every rule the Thaurochs relied on. A junior officer entered the chamber, his voice uneasy. "Sir, confirmation just came in. 3 more outposts lost. 1 squad captured. Another voluntarily surrendered." Vex turned slowly. "They surrendered to the humans?" "Yes, sir. They claimed they were surrounded. Said the humans offered medical care in exchange for intel." Vex's gaze hardened. "And they gave it?" The officer nodded. "Not just maps, frequencies, encryption keys. It appears some of them trust the humans more than they trust our command." The silence that followed was heavy. The humans had done something the Dominion never expected. They had taken the fight and turned it into a cause, not just for their own kind, but now even for some of their enemies. Back on Earth, a new message began circulating on public networks. It was a simple phrase, repeated across languages, painted on buildings and worn on homemade uniforms. "We are Earth. We are not your prey." The words were not a threat. They were a promise. By the end of the first week, Earth no longer looked like a planet under siege. It looked like a planet at war together. The Thaurochs still held space superiority, but their advantage on the ground had vanished. What was supposed to be a fast conquest had turned into a prolonged disaster. In makeshift laboratories across the globe, scientists and engineers pored over salvaged alien devices, trying to understand how the enemy thought, moved, and fought. And it was working. In northern India, a team of university students repurposed a downed Thaurochs drone into a mobile sensor unit capable of detecting cloak movement. In California, a coalition of civilian hackers bypassed Dominion encryption protocols, giving Earth full access to intercepted alien chatter. In Munich, a converted rail yard became a testing ground where prototypes of hybrid weapons Earth made, but powered by alien cores, were taking shape. Rapid-fire plasma rifles, EMP grenades, and reactive armor lined with scavenged alloys. Human creativity, mixed with urgency, was beginning to rewrite the rules of warfare. But the real turning point wasn't just in weapons. It was in unity. A Thaurochs cruiser attempted a second landing. Near Lagos, the humans responded before it even touched down. Within 30 minutes, two nations, 3 militia groups, and a team of civilian engineers coordinated a counter-assault that disabled the ship's engine mid-hover, crashing it into the coastal dunes before its soldiers could even disembark. Drone footage of the incident went viral globally. But what truly caught the galaxy's attention was what came next. The survivors aboard the alien cruiser, injured, disoriented, and leaderless, were given food and medical attention by local responders. Not as prisoners, as people. Commander Sarnal Vex watched the playback from his observation deck in stunned silence. "Why would they help them?" asked one of his officers. "They've killed hundreds of humans." Vex didn't answer right away. He simply stared at the image of a human medic stabilizing a Thaurochs soldier with a portable oxygen kit. "They fight like predators," Vex murmured, "but they protect like family." Back on Earth, in a hidden resistance hub beneath Oslo, a network of leaders met virtually. Military, civilian, academic. No ranks, just minds. "We've learned enough about their systems," said Dr. Lena Mirsky, one of Europe's top physicists. "We can create a jamming signal strong enough To disrupt their fleet's short-range communications temporarily, at least. How long? Asked General Cartwright, passing from a bunker beneath Colorado. 20 minutes, maybe less. But it's enough to isolate their units across the globe. If we time it right, we can force a retreat from key zones. What's the cost? We'll need to detonate 3 signal amplifiers in high orbit. We can build them, but we need to get them there. There was silence for a moment. Then, a voice crackled in from a Pacific submarine base. We have a captured transport ship. It's damaged, but it can fly. We can carry the payload. The operation codenamed Thunderflash was greenlit that same night. It took only 72 hours. On a quiet morning, the Thalric's fleet detected 3 energy spikes rising from Earth's surface. They didn't react fast enough. Within seconds, the amplifiers activated, bursting with coordinated EMP surges that fried local Dominion comms and guidance systems across low orbit. Human forces launched synchronized strikes across 6 continents. Cut off from command, alien units began to panic. Some tried to retreat, others surrendered, and some were overwhelmed before they could react at all. For the first time, the humans didn't just defend. They pushed forward. They won. Commander Vex stared at a tactical map, watching blinking red icons vanish by the second. This isn't just resistance, he said softly. This is the beginning of something far greater. On Earth, celebrations were brief. Victories were acknowledged, but not flaunted. The war wasn't over, but the message was clear. Humanity was no longer defending its home. It was preparing to take the fight beyond it. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the first time in centuries. Holograms of leaders from over a dozen advanced civilizations flickered into existence. Around the great chamber of Orvis Prime, the room, carved from starstone and suspended above a gas giant, had seen the rise and fall of empires but never had a witness to report. Like the one being delivered now, Ambassador Vrol, a pale-skinned representative of the Thalric's Dominion, stood before the council podium, his voice calm but laced with frustration. The situation on Earth is no longer a matter of conquest, he began. It is a matter of containment. A ripple of disbelief passed through the chamber. Containment? Asked the silken-toned envoy of the Relary Consortium. You deployed 3 dreadnoughts and a full occupation fleet. The species wasn't even spacefaring. They weren't supposed to be, Vrol replied. But they are no longer what they were. They have changed. He paused and activated a data sphere. Dozens of images appeared in the Aerith built. Weapons laced with Thalric's tech, human fighters wearing hybrid armor, ground-to-orbit projectiles that didn't exist just a week ago. They learned it quickly. They adapt. They take our technology and improve it. Another delegate leaned forward. They're reverse engineering plasma systems. Yes. At worst, they've begun decoding Dominion fleet protocols. We intercepted a signal burst using one of our frequencies. They're probing our networks. Murmurs spread through the council floor. The Vernari elder spoke slowly, voice like crumbling leaves. And what of their social structure? Are they unified? Organized? Vrol hesitated. No. But that may be why we're losing. More murmurs. On Earth, disagreements were normal. Chaos was normal. But instead of dividing them, the pressure of survival had pulled humans together in ways that defied conventional analysis. Independent cells communicated seamlessly. Nations shared secrets without guarantees. Individuals stepped forward not for power, but because something deep inside them had been awakened. And the galaxy was watching. Across fringe worlds, resistance movements took hope from Earth's story. In quiet rebellion channels on conquered planets, humans were no longer unknown primitives, they were symbols. Back on Earth, the momentum had shifted entirely. In Brazil, a group of farmers and engineers repelled a last-ditch Thalric's attempt to re-establish a control tower. In Egypt, a captured transport was converted into a functional shuttle. It wasn't pretty, but it could leave the atmosphere. In a hidden facility beneath the Swiss Alps, leaders met in person. No politics, no posturing, just purpose. General Cartwright stood before the international coalition. We have the chance to end this, she said. Not just drive them off-world, but send a message the entire galaxy can hear. On the screen behind her, a schematic of a Thalric's command ship rotated slowly. We've learned its weaknesses, we've reconstructed its comm systems, and we know how to get aboard. A hush fell over the room. The plan is dangerous. It may not work, but if it does, we won't just survive this invasion, we'll finish it. They called the mission Dawn Strike. Volunteers flooded in, from pilots to medics. Engineers to translators, every participant knew the risks, and they accepted them. Because Earth had changed. Because they had changed, and above all, because they refused to be forgotten or dismissed again. On Orvis Prime, the Council debated endlessly, still unsure how a single backwater planet had thrown an empire into disarray. But in space, aboard the Ecliptara, Commander Vex felt something deeper, respect for the enemy that was no longer simply resisting. They were becoming something new. High, above Earth, hidden behind the shadow of the moon, the human shuttle Spearhead 1 drifted silently. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't fast, but it was armed with one thing that terrified the Dominion fleet: human ingenuity. On board were 12 hand-picked individuals from 7 nations, soldiers, engineers, linguists, medics, and one pilot who had never flown anything bigger than a cargo hauler 6 months ago. Each one carried a purpose. Each one carried the hopes of a planet still under siege, but no longer on its knees. Their target, the Dominion command ship Vexillor Prime, in orbit over Earth's southern hemisphere. It was the last fully functional Thalrux ship coordinating. What remained of the invasion, taking it out wouldn't just disrupt the invaders, it would break them. Inside the Spearhead, the atmosphere was tense but calm. Commander Lena Torres, a former astronaut turned resistance leader, reviewed the infiltration plan one last time. "We breached the outer hull at Deck 7 Engineering Core," she said, gesturing at the 3D display. "We mapped there. Maintenance routines. That section's minimally staffed. The plan was simple. Breach. Upload a virus to disrupt the Dominion ship-wide AI and disable the primary communication array. The human-coded virus, written in 5 different languages and compiled by a coalition of programmers across 4 continents, had one purpose: silence the Thalrux permanently. Their window of approach was short, only 43 seconds between Dominion patrol scans, but they made it, using a salvage cloaking device and improvised thrusters. Spearhead 1 lashed onto the hull with barely a whisper. The team cut through the alloy plating with a plasma sawbelt from mining tools and alien parts. And just like that, humans walked aboard a Thalrux command vessel for the first time. Inside, the halls were quiet. The quiet. Dr. Rajan Singh, a systems expert from New Delhi, tapped his tablet nervously. Their security net just dropped. Either our jamming signal's holding, or they're waiting for us, Torres finished. Still, they moved fast. Through narrow corridors and dim-lit tunnels, they reached the core. Singh linked into the command console, sweat beading on his forehead as he began uploading the virus. Alien symbols flashed across the screen, intercut with code in English, Mandarin, Hindi, Russian. Then an alert. "They've spotted us," Singh said. "We've got 3 minutes." That's when the firefight started. Thalrux security units swarmed the corridor. Plasma bolts lit the air, but the humans were faster, more coordinated. They fought not with superior firepower, but with desperation, teamwork, and absolute resolve. Torres held the flank while a medic named Nord dragged an injured comrade to cover. A retired mechanic from South Korea rewired a blast door to trap 3 enemy troops mid-charge, and Singh, he kept typing. Almost there. The moment the virus triggered, the lights flickered across the Vexillor Prime. Sirens cut out. Doors slammed shut. The ship lurched. Monitors turned black, then flashed with a human-made symbol, a stylized E encircled by stars. Back on Earth, Dominion troops still on the ground looked up just in time to see their orbiting command ships. Engines sputter, then go dark. The Vexillor Prime was falling, but not crashing. Gliding. Controlled descent. Torres' voice came through Earth comms. "Target disabled. We're guiding it down safely. They're out of the sky." The world watched as the last symbol of Dominion power dropped from the heavens. It landed intact on an empty stretch of desert. Its systems fried, its crew disoriented, and its war lost. Cheers erupted across every continent. In bunkers, in fields, in streets and ruins, people cried, laughed, hugged strangers. The skies were theirs again. On Orvis Prime, the Galactic Council sat in stunned silence as live feeds from Earth showed humans walking alongside captured Thalrux soldiers, not as enemies, but as survivors. The war for Earth had ended, but something greater was beginning. Humanity had stepped into the galaxy's view not as victims, but as equals, and the galaxy would never be the same. The weeks after the fall of the Vexillor Prime, Earth stood united in a way it never had before. From the remains of shattered cities and silent battlefields, the people of Earth emerged bruised, battered, but unbroken, borders blurred, flags flew side by side. Nations that had once competed for power now shared blueprints, medicine, and food. The old world was gone. In its place stood something entirely new. A council formed not of politicians, but of survivors, scientists, soldiers, and builders. They called it the Earth Accord. Its charter was simple. Humanity would never again be taken by surprise, never again divided by conflict, and never again underestimated. But Earth didn't just rebuild. It listened. Scattered across the globe were hundreds of surrendered Thalruk's troops. Some were afraid, others were injured. A few had even helped resistance fighters in their final hours, and in a gesture no one expected, Earth treated them with dignity. They were fed, sheltered, and given the choice to speak openly. In a secured facility in New Zealand, a Thalruk's engineer named Velrun shared critical knowledge about his people's technology. He didn't do it for reward or safety. He did it because he had seen something that shook him more than defeat. Compassion from those they had tried to conquer. Across the stars, the story spread. On the edge of the Zora system, a pirate crew tuned into intercepted Earth transmissions, hoping for loot, and instead hearing hope. In the silence mining colonies of the Arvin Belt, oppressed workers watched as Earth's resistance became legend. On trade hubs in neutral zones, Earth's makeshift flag NE encircled by stars appeared on jackets, walls, and ship hulls. And then, something that had never happened before occurred. The Galactic Council received a transmission from Earth. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a plea. It was an invitation. Projected across the chamber on Orvis Prime was a simple message. To the civilizations beyond our sky, we are the people of Earth. We fought not to conquer, but to survive. We seek understanding, not domination. If you're willing to speak, so are we. But let this be known, this planet is not alone. Not anymore. Silence followed. But it wasn't ignorance. It was respect. Commander Sarnal Vex, now recalled from his post, stood among the council delegation, watching the human ambassador's face on the transmission. A woman named Dr. Alara Mo, formerly a biologist, now Earth's appointed voice. She didn't look like a leader of warriors, but the galaxy was learning that Earth's strength had never come from weapons. It came from will. Back home, the skies once again belonged to the people. Cities powered up, clean water flowed. The global network buzzed with stories not just of battle, but of courage and kindness. Videos of resistance fighters shielding civilians, doctors treating injured enemies, and strangers risking their lives for one another filled screens across the planet. In the wreckage of an old museum in Rome, children painted stars on the walls. Above them hung a makeshift banner that came to take our world. We reminded them who we are. But the victory came with questions. What lay beyond the Dominion? Were there more like them? What other threats lingered in the darkness? Earth would need to learn fast. Already, Scaven's Thalruk's tech was being rebuilt into space-worthy vessels. Not warships, but watchers, explorers, defenders. Humanity wasn't going to wait for the next invader. They were going to meet the galaxy on their own terms, and when they arrived, it wouldn't be as survivors. It would be as equals. The stars no longer looked distant. They looked like the next chapter. Months had passed since Earth's message echoed across the Galactic Council chambers. The world had changed, but the journey was only beginning. The battered planet was no longer a backwater. It was a beacon. The humans had survived the impossible, not by overwhelming force, but by unyielding spirit. And now, they stood ready to step beyond their skies. At the newly constructed Earth Space Command Center, a sprawling facility nestled beneath the Endes, leaders gathered. It was a blend of Earth's greatest minds, scientists, diplomats, and veterans, all working together toward a common goal. Today, said Ambassador Alara Moan, addressing the assembled crowd, we prepare for first contact. The words reverberated beyond the chamber walls, carried on broadcast waves to every corner of the globe. No longer was Earth isolated. New ships, hybrids of human ingenuity and alien technology, were ready for launch. Their purpose wasn't conquest. It was connection. Lieutenant Commander Jamal Reeves, pilot of the first exploratory vessel, stood at the helm. He studied the star charts projected before him, the weight of responsibility heavy but steady. We carry the hopes of billions, he said quietly to his co-pilot, and the promise that Earth is not just a planet, but a people who will never back down. In the days that followed, transmissions arrived from curious neighbors, neutral species, distant allies, and even former enemies watching cautiously. Dialogue began, tentative but hopeful. Back on Orvis Prime, The Galactic Council convened once more, this time with Earth no longer a subject of debate, but an invited participant. Discussions turned to cooperation, knowledge exchange, and shared security. Commander Vex, now Earth's liaison, observed the chamber's energy with cautious optimism. The galaxy was not without its dangers, but Earth had earned its place at the table. Still, the question lingered: what threats awaited beyond? The known, in the dark reaches, whispers spoke of a shadowy force, ancient and relentless. But Earth faced the future not with fear, but with readiness. Humanity had learned one crucial truth: survival was not about avoiding the storm. It was about standing in it, together, on a clear night, beneath a sky crowded with stars. Children across Earth looked upward, dreaming of worlds beyond their own, and somewhere, deep in the void, a new chapter was unfolding. For Earth was no longer alone. It was part of something greater, a galaxy that, at last, had met its match. The dawn of a new era had arrived.